Welcome everybody, my name is Justin Conroy, and in this video I'm going to give you my picks for the top 5 best Vanguard index funds across various risk profile categories. Now, Vanguard has over 120 different index funds that we can choose from, so how do we narrow down our list? Well, there's a few things we can do. First thing, we're only going to be looking at Vanguard Admiral Shares because of their lower minimum investment requirement, which by the way is $3,000. Second thing, we're only going to be looking at funds with expense ratios of 0.05% or less. Third, we're only going to be looking at funds that are at least 5 years old. And fourth, we're going to be taking a look at the fund's overall lifetime performance because we obviously want that number to be pretty high. So with that criteria alone, we're able to take that list of 120 index funds down to 8. Now, my goal here is to give you a list of 5 across various risk profile categories. So what are those risk profile categories? Risk profile categories are usually based on your age, but more specifically, they should be based on when you're planning to retire. So if you take a look at this diagram, you can see the 5 different categories on the left, which are aggressive, growth, moderate, conservative, and income. These are your portfolio types, but if we take a look on the right side of that chart, we can see the funds that make up those portfolio types. For example, small cap funds, mid cap funds, large cap funds, and bonds. So starting with the most risky funds down to the least risky funds, or in other words, the funds with the highest fluctuations down to those with the least, we're going to start with VSMAX, which is Vanguard's small cap fund Admiral Shares. Now, VSMAX has an expense ratio of 0.05 with an R-squared value of 0.88 over the last 5 years. Let me just take a quick second to talk about that in case you don't know. R-squared value is a measure of how closely this index fund is matching the actual index. Now, the interesting thing about this is I don't actually consider an R-squared value of 0.88 to be good. In fact, I actually consider that to be pretty bad. But based on the criteria that I had already applied for the Vanguard index funds that I talked about earlier, this was my best choice for a small cap fund. Now, you may not feel the same way about this R-squared value like I do, but if you do, and if you have the choice of going outside of Vanguard for a small cap fund selection, you may want to look at another vendor such as Fidelity. Alright, back to the details. The fund is over 20 years old with an average annual return over the lifetime of the fund of 10.2%. There's a minimum investment of $3,000 US. Their main market sector holdings are technology, industrials, and healthcare, and their top 3 holdings are Charles River Laboratories International, Avantor, and Biotechne. Next on the list, moving down that curve a little bit, we're going to get VIMAX, which is the Vanguard Mid-Cap Index Fund Admiral Shares. Now, VIMAX has an expense ratio of 0.05 with an R-squared value of 0.92 over the last 5 years. The fund is almost 20 years old with an average annual return over the lifetime of the fund of 11.05%. There's a minimum investment of $3,000 US. The main market sector holdings are technology, healthcare, and consumer cyclical, with top 3 holdings in IDEX Laboratories, DocuSign, and IQVIA Holdings. Third on the list, we're going to get VIGAX, which is the Vanguard Growth Index Fund Admiral Shares. VIGAX has an expense ratio of 0.05% with an R-squared value of 0.91 over the last 5 years. The fund is over 20 years old with an average annual return over the lifetime of the fund of 8.73%. There's a minimum investment of $3,000 US with main market sector holdings in technology, consumer cyclical, and communication services, with top 3 holdings in Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. Moving down the curve a little bit more, fourth on the list, we have VFIAX, which is the Vanguard 500 Index Fund Admiral Shares. VFIAX has an expense ratio of 0.04%, with an R-squared value of 1 over the last 5 years, which is awesome. The fund is over 20 years old with an average annual return over the lifetime of the fund of 7.84%. There's a minimum investment of $3,000 US with main market sector holdings in technology, financial services, and healthcare, with top 3 holdings in Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. Finally, at the bottom of the curve, the least risky fund here, VTBLX, which is the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund Admiral Shares. VTBLX has an expense ratio of 0.05% with an R-squared value of 0.99 over the last 5 years. The fund is over 20 years old with an average annual return over the lifetime of the fund of 4.18%. There's a minimum investment of $3,000 US, and their main holdings are federal national mortgage bonds and US Treasury notes. So in summary, from most aggressive to least aggressive, we have have VSMAX, which is Vanguard Small Cap Index Fund Admiral Shares, VIMAX, which is the Vanguard Mid Cap Index Fund Admiral Shares, VIGAX, which is the Vanguard Growth Index Fund Admiral Shares, VFIAX, which is the Vanguard 500 Index Fund Admiral Shares, and finally VTBLX, which is the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund Admiral Shares. Well, when it comes to my top picks of the 5 best Vanguard Index Fund across all those various risk profile categories, there you have it. If you made it this far in the video, you rock. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I do have one favor to ask of you though, and I'm not going to ask you for a subscribe or a like. I just want you to answer one of 2 questions down in the comments below. What did you like about this video? Or what would have made this video better? I'm really trying to make better content for you guys, so your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Have a good day.